So my fact today is just talking about the four potential additional characters that were supposed to be in this game. One is considered, and the other three were actually worked on in some form or fashion. And we can just talk about whether they'd be good or bad, and then what characters we think they could have added. One of that was considered, and this is according to Smash Bros. Wiki, like the general wiki. One that was considered was Marth from Fire Emblem, which was obviously, and even in Melee, was a Japanese only series at that point. That would have been interesting. He would have been like another sword wielding character, I imagine, in the similar vein to his Melee counterpart. But obviously with whatever limitations we have here. Another three that were scrapped but actually worked on. One was Bowser.
Who?
I suspect that Bowser was probably close to being finished because Miyamoto is even being quoted as saying he's in the game. So he must have been playable, I would assume, at some point, or maybe Miyamoto just told that. But Bowser would have been an obvious addition to this that I guess would have been like another big guy like Donkey Kong. We've seen how he plays in the regular game in like Melee and Forward, so I suspect it would have been that, but a little bit slower because this game in general is just a little slower. Another big guy would have been King DDD, which I think would have been a really bad idea, but I understand why, just because of who made the game. But that would have been interesting. We've seen him later. I guess just another big guy, but I'd be curious how they would put him in this game, and if anybody would even know who the fuck he is. And then Mewtwo would have been the last one, which we did see him in Melee. Again, I see it because Pokemon was so huge. It kind of makes sense, but there's already two. If anything, you could probably remove Jigglypuff and put Mewtwo in, and that would be probably a good idea since there's kind of already a Jigglypuff in the game. His name is Kirby, so you don't really need two of them. So I think Mewtwo would actually have been a good addition, and then you could have opened up the room for another one that isn't Jigglypuff. So those are the four. Now, I was wondering if you guys had any idea what would be a great addition, considering the N64 and where Nintendo was at the time, and that they're only using first party stuff.
Yeah, the characters you mentioned for Marth would have been interesting because it is strange going back to the first game because there's only one sword character as opposed to now where there's 80 sword characters. So even in Melee, Marth stood out. So and he was pretty simple, like moveset wise. So I felt like he would have been a good one. Bowser would have been interesting for one because the character models in this game are very low poly, so they already look like shit for the most part when you're playing matches. Like they had to lower the polygon counts for most of the character models to make up for the fact that you have so many on screen at once. So I would like to see how Bowser would have looked in this style because I imagine he would have looked worse than his Mario 64 variant. It's fashion. But I think he would have been cool. DDD, he is a strange inclusion. I get why, because it's Sakurai and people know Kirby at this point, but maybe not his extended cast.
Right.
But I like DDD when he came to like Brawl and stuff. But even in Brawl, like his moveset feels more complicated than it would have been here. So I don't know how they would have put him in. Like maybe he just like swung his hammer around or something. I don't know what his moveset would have been in the original game. And Mewtwo I think would have made a lot more sense than Jigglypuff. But Jigglypuff only got in because they could reuse Kirby and paint it as Jigglypuff. Because this game, Smash 64, is a rushed game. This is basically the prototype game, where the Melee is what they wanted to make. So like this game was rushed out the door. So a lot of the like unlockable characters are reused assets, basically. So that's why Jigglypuff made it in.
Interesting. I think in hindsight, with how Marth turned out, he would have been way too OP for this game if they did the standard moveset that they have in Melee on. But I agree that it would be nice to have another sword user. The only flip side of that, we can get into Link later, is his... I actually don't know if his sword like puts him above other characters in this game. So when it comes to Marth, I think it's fine without him. And then also in terms of recognition or in terms of like who's like a new introduced character What Fire Emblem games are they introducing us to up to this point? Like some on the Super Nintendo, maybe. I don't know. Whereas I think it made
No,
more sense later. When it comes to Bowser, I do think that's a missed opportunity. That would be a really cool inclusion, just even for like the sake of like getting to pit up even like characters against Bowser on the 64. It's a different take on Mario versus Bowser as opposed to Mario 64. Being able to replicate that spin move with Mario where he swings him off the table or off the the platform, that could have been really cool. So I would have liked to see Bowser in 64. DDD, I think also could have been too overpowered with the hammer if that was the inclusion. If not, if there is no hammer in terms of like a smash attack or something, which there aren't in this game, it could have been cool. But I understand too, like HAL Laboratories has always kind of had their foot in with Pokemon, so I think like that kind of is a big representation here as far as HAL Laboratories. You have 2 Pokemon characters and a Kirby, so I don't know. I'm good without him. And then the last one was Mewtwo. I don't know. I mean, what other big boss characters do you have like in this roster? Donkey Kong? Like I don't know who Mewtwo can like. Mewtwo might also seem too overpowered. So like for me personally, I'm okay with saving Mewtwo for later when they kind of balance out multiple types of characters and kind of introduce him as like a super OP type. Whereas Bowser, I think, could have been a really cool one. I know you could probably make that argument for Bowser too. Oh, he would have been too overpowered, but I don't know.
Any that you guys think they should have added? And remember that it's N64 and prior.
Yeah, from that time. I'm trying to think for characters from that time period that would have made sense because it seems like they stuck to the characters that were like leading characters in a sense, like either like even like Donkey Kong and Yoshi were like they led their own games,
Mhm.
at that point. DK had a number of games, of course. And then, I mean, he was the original, and then Yoshi. I think at that point had Yoshi's Island and Yoshi's Story. I think was
Yeah,
out
he
at
did.
this point, so 2 big games. So I'm trying to think of like what other leading characters would have made it
Well,
in.
and then Jigglypuff's Grand Adventure. I remember that one.
Yeah, that's why Jigglypuff's so fucking okay. Luigi makes sense because it's Luigi, right? But Jigglypuff makes 0 sense outside of the fact that they were like, we need another Pokemon and we can reuse Kirby. And so I mean, and I'm saying that with Jigglypuff being my current favorite character in the roster, but yeah, as a kid, that always pissed me off because I'm like, why is Jigglypuff here? They could have put some of the other cool Pokemon or something.
Mhm.
But so as a kid, I probably would have replaced Jigglypuff with another Pokemon or with like Bowser or like Wario. Wario would have made sense because he had a bunch of games at that
Mhm.
too. So he was a leading character at that point too. So he would have made sense in the roster.
Yeah, I would have considered. It's a little hard just because in every game he's a little different. But they were doing Bowser. I would have considered Ganondorf or Ganon, but not the way that they do it. I don't like the modern Ganondorf, like Melee and above. It irritates me that it seems like it's just a
It's
reskin.
just Captain. Yeah, it's just Captain Falcon.
I think they could have been more creative, but it's a little hard because in every iteration he's a little different. I mean, I guess you could just do a pig guy with a
Like 2
trident or whatever.
swords or something, or I
Or
don't know.
yeah, you could do something like that. Or you could do Ganondorf from N64 or the Ganon from N64, and find a way to do it. But I guess artistically it'd be a little bit hard because you would never really please everybody. They haven't really been consistent with that character at this point. So that could be a struggle. Um, yeah, I don't know that there's. It's interesting too because like nowadays we see like a million different things that have come out in Nintendo consoles, but back then there was a little bit closer to the chest with what they would release. And some of the big games, like I'm a big RPG guy, but they didn't really make RPGs. Like Earthbound is barely a Nintendo game. I'm actually kind of surprised it's in this. So it's like a lot of that stuff's kind of out. So it is very weird. And I can't really see a lot that they could add that would really be on brand at this point in the history.
Yeah, except for Tony Hawk.
Yeah. I mean, like honestly, I am surprised there's not more rare representation in here. You have some reference to country, and you have the landmine is technically from GoldenEye. So that's weird.
Yeah.
That is the one from GoldenEye. They
Okay, then
later
James
on,
Bond.
yeah. Later on, after Rare obviously got bought up, they had to change that reference. But no, it is the exact weapon from GoldenEye. But so like it is weird that we didn't see like a Battletoad or like a Banjo or somebody in here, somebody that was, because like Nintendo would have still had close association to that stuff at this point. And like especially Banjo would have made perfect sense for this game. Because I mean he was a huge character on the N64. So I don't know.
And even looking at this
Maybe.
roster, like Donkey Kong isn't really playing like a villain archetype. So there really are no major villains in this roster. So I even hesitate to say like, oh, let's put Bowser like or like other like villains that are like nemesis to some of these other characters. And then the Pokemon thing, like Pokemon has an interesting conundrum here in that a lot of them are items in the game because the Pokeball is a major item, and there's so many Pokemon that are unlockable. Even with the Mewtwo thing, like Mew is unlockable as an item. So I'm kind of like on the fence about adding anyone at this point. The pool is pretty low in terms of protagonists, and even with Jigglypuff, like you need somebody that's kind of on the same level as Pikachu if we're adding Pokemon. So like they're both small, they both have their own unique movesets. Like I understand Jigglypuff. I empathize, So
yeah,
no,
Jigglypuff was a popular. Jigglypuff was a popular character in the anime at that point. So
yeah,
I feel like
that makes sense.
that's mainly why she made it into the game, was because of that audience, and they were like, well, Pokemon, makes money. So
My
you gotta add
father,
another
who's
popular
like over 70 years old, could tell you who Jigglypuff is.
When you said my father, I can't hear anybody say my father without thinking of the Joker, dude. My father.
My father.
My father knows who Jigglypuff is.
There you go, Batman connection.
Do you know how Jigglypuff got into Smash, Batman? Do you want to guess?
My father.
My father has a connection at HAL Laboratories. And they said, what Pokemon do you want to put in? And that's when he said, Jigglypuff. That's it.
Cool. Cool facts, Spencer. Thanks. Thanks for sharing your Smash facts. You smashing young lad. Somebody say something.
Hey y'all, don't forget to subscribe to them button mappers.